Please state your name and the date, and that you approve being recorded.
My name is John Mac Poindexter IV. Today's date is February 14th, 2021, and I have given approval for this recording.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So as you know, we're doing this project, Why Winston? And we were wondering, because it is a little bit controversial to you, is it Winston? Is it Salem? Or is it Winston-Salem?
I've always referred to it as Winston-Salem. I have always referred to it as Winston-Salem. But I have heard others refer to it as either or.
And you said always, so how long is that? How long is the always for you, for Winston-Salem?
Always, for me, has been 50 plus years.
So you were born here?
1967. Yeah.
Oh, all
Yeah, I
right.
was born here. This is my hometown.
And
it sure is.
And how many generations? Are you a first generationer or a multi-generationer?
Actually, I'm the fourth generation of Poindexters in my family. Yes.
But in the Winston-Salem area?
Yes. Winston-Salem and Rural Hall.
So you're a North Carolinian through and through.
I know. Through and through. Carolina born and bred.
Wonderful. I want to remind you, if you can remember, to try to repeat the question and the answer.
Yes.
So we can get that on tape. If you can, don't feel stressed out about it. So you have at least 4 generations in the area, correct?
Yes.
All right. And do you know where your ancestry comes from prior to that?
Well, on my father's side, my great grandparents are from Oxford, the Oxford, North Carolina area. They had 3 daughters, which was my grandmother, Mildred Ridley Poindexter, and her 2 sisters. And they moved from Oxford to Winston-Salem. And that's where Winston-Salem is where they were educated and took off from high school in terms of going to college. My grandmother and another aunt, great aunt, went to Winston-Salem Teachers College. And then my grandmother went to North Carolina A&T State University for her master's degree. And I forget where my great aunt went to get her master's degree, but they were both educators and had careers in education here in North Carolina.
Do you know what brought their father to this area? Was it an economic boom of some sort that brought them?
You know, I hate, do I know what brought my grandparents or great-grandparents to Winston-Salem? That's a great question. I've always wondered. I don't have anyone to ask directly, but I do know that the county that Oxford, North Carolina is in is Granville County. And for anyone who knows anything about history in this area or cultural history in this area would know that Granville, North Carolina was one of the headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan. And so Oxford, North Carolina has had a very has had tense racial struggles in the past, of which my family was involved. The Ridley family was involved in a situation in Oxford, North Carolina, that sort of divided the city. And one of the, I believe it was a white Methodist minister came together with one of the leaders in the Black community in Oxford to sort of um, calm the city. Uh, um, and I believe it dealt with the death of a Black person who was killed by rapists in the area. But there was a movie and a book that was written about the situation. Blood, blood didn't find my name, if I'm not mistaken. But they did a movie about it as well. I wasn't even aware of it until I just came across this movie. And with that in mind, I figured that it had to have had something to do with the racial strife in Oxford and having to raise three daughters in what should have been around the early 1930s, possibly. So that is my
That's,
assumption. That's not,
yeah. It does sound like that would be a good, like, logical reason why they would leave Oxford for. Plus, at that time, I believe the mills might have the tobacco mills were probably in full swing at that point, from the Reynolds dynasty. So there was an economic boom here, for people, that might draw people. So that
absolutely.
was where I have like a bunch of questions stemming from that. Those were
Sure.
your mother's people. What about your father's people?
Now, those were my father's. That was my father's side of the family.
Oh, your father. Sorry, it makes it.
Yes. My mother's from Hamlet, North Carolina, and wow, we have pictures of my. Well, they're not even pictures. We have a portrait that was drawn of my great great grandfather, and he's in a nice suit and tie. He's dressed up with I believe he has a hat on as well. And he was an educator, my mother told me, but we don't know quite as much history um, on my mother's side as we do my father's side, and even that is very little.
So you spoke about your grandparents, your grandmother and her sisters on your father's side, um, being educators and attending A&T and the Teachers College. Um, did you get any information from them about what it was like attending university for them at the time, considering, it was a different time?
Did I receive any information from my grandmother or grandparents about attending college uh, when they were being educated? The only thing that I received really from my grandmother was encouragement to just continue and to pursue education. And she definitely made a point of instilling that in myself and my brother and sister, all of my cousins as well. We were all um, driven for excellence in education. Um, they really, you know, did not talk much at all about things in the past. Not at all. And I know that it was probably a lot of trauma around that. They probably didn't want to, um, I don't know, frighten or have us worry about what they had gone through. But no, there wasn't much communication at all, um, about their past experiences.
I was curious, because of A&T, and I don't know about Winston-Salem's Teachers College because I don't think it exists anymore. But did you attend an HBCU, and were HBCUs kind of, when they said they nurtured this love of learning, was it also like legacy, like let's try to continue the legacy?
Did I attend an HBCU, and did they encourage me to continue the legacy? I would say yes, they did. And you do know the Teachers College. Winston-Salem Teachers College evolved into Winston-Salem State. And then it became a part of the University of North Carolina, the system. So it ended up being Winston-Salem State. And I attended Winston-Salem State. That's where I graduated with my with a bachelor's degree in mass communication. So I graduated from the same school that my grandmother graduated from, and my mother as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for the lesson. I did not know that history, and I'm super grateful that we have uncovered it.
Yeah.
So you've spent a lot of time here. Have you ever left Winston-Salem for any significant period of time? Yes or no, and why or why not?
Have I ever left Winston-Salem for a significant period of time? Yes or no? Why not? And yes, I have been away from Winston on different periods of time. I grew up in the theater here, so I always knew that at one point I would have to leave to pursue my dream of acting. And so I have worked for companies. I worked for a company that was based out of Asheville, North Carolina, but it was a touring company. And it was a company called Poetry Alive, and they teamed actors with pairs of actors that they would send across the country to school districts, from Alaska to the state of Washington. And you would have to memorize poetry from all different types of poets. And what you were doing is you were performing the poetry. So we were some of the first performance poets that were on the poetry slam scene. The poetry slam sort of stemmed from this small movement back in I would say that was the early 90s. And so I did that, got to see the United States, and came back to my home base at the theater, and worked there as we were creating the first National Black Theater Festival. I worked there for a number of years through the theater festivals, and then decided that it was time to sort of branch out and see what else existed outside of Winston-Salem. So I lived in Washington, D.C. for a while, and I ended up going out to Los Angeles for a stint, and then eventually returning to Winston-Salem. But those were both adventures, to say the least. Yeah.
It's always nice to know there's a home to return to, right?
Thank God. Thank God.
Whether it's
Thank
literal or metaphorical.
I mean, really, I'm telling you, when I came home from Los Angeles, I was so ready because things just were not happening the way that I had anticipated for them to happen. Although I was connected with folks that were doing things just weren't jumping off for me. And I had gotten to a point where I could at least kind of afford a bus ticket back home. And I made all of my arrangements, and coming home from Los Angeles was more of an adventure than being in Los Angeles.
That's hilarious. I wanted to rewind just a little bit, and you said you had been involved in the theater, and I'm assuming that was from a young age. And I know that your daughter goes to RJ Reynolds, and my son goes to RJ Reynolds, and that's considered an arts-based high school with a really great theater program. And then when I moved to Winston, that was at the summertime, and I learned about the National Black Theater Festival. And I was like, it was like I was in this oasis of arts in the middle of the South, and I was dumbstruck really that it existed. It almost seemed like an oasis that wasn't real, but it is real. So can you talk a little bit about that history, that rich history of theater and the arts?
Can I speak on the rich history of theater and the arts in Winston-Salem? I'll be more than happy to. And you're right, it has a very, very rich history. I was very fortunate. When I was in high school, I was involved through my guidance counselor in a peer counseling program. And it was for high school students to become peer counselors for students that were in the seventh grade or junior high school. At the time, I was at RJ Reynolds, and so they assigned me to someone at Wiley. And so, out of chance, the young man that I became a peer counselor to was the son of Mabel Robinson, who's an acclaimed choreographer and dancer, Broadway star, who was at the time being courted by the School of the Arts to join their dance faculty. She did subsequently accept the position, and she taught here for many, many, many years. But her son, Joseph, and I became more than peer counselor clients. We are literally brothers. We're still in contact to this day. We're very, very close. And he's just become part of my family, and I've become part of their family. And although Winston-Salem had a very rich history before I dove deeper into the cultural aspect of this community, I was always made aware that Winston-Salem, was home to many, many artists that had come before me, such as Pam Grier and Rosie Grier. We had connections there. Jack A. Harry, who went on to become an Emmy Award-winning actress. Is from Winston-Salem. My grandparents lived right behind us, one street over. And there was word that I believe it was the tap dance. I forget the tap dance brothers. They were one of the brothers.
Is it Gregory?
It was before them. One of the brothers married Dorothy Dandridge back in the day. I forget their names. They're legendary, but I was told they had roots here in Winston-Salem as well. And this was all told through a member of our church who was a very close family friend, and Miss Louise Smith. She always sort of kept us informed and wanted us to know that you really come from a community that is rich in culture. And I can say that she and my grandmother probably were the cause of me getting involved in the art. But we'll skip forward. Once I became very close with Mabel, she started working with us at the theater. And so we started a working relationship. And I was just amazed, not only at her reach in the not only dance world, but theater world, theatrical world, and film world as well. She was one of the first to do so many things, and is still not that well known on the level that I think she deserves to be. Yes, but we have a very rich cultural history. Through Mabel Robinson, I had an opportunity to meet Maya Angelou. The two of them were very close friends. And then, of course, through the theater festival itself, I was able to be introduced to legendary, trailblazing artists of color that I still can't believe that I've had the privilege of meeting.
Wow. So I'm going to build on your information with that. So I know you said you were one of the founders of the National Black Theater Festival. Is that correct?
Now, I could not take credit for being one of the founders of the theater festival. I was only 13 or 14 when the concept was being created. You know, I like to think that I was probably one of the maybe muses that helped to sort of shape the festival, keeping young minds, young creatives in mind. Um, yeah, I was only like between 13 and maybe 17 during the development of that of the theater festival. But I mean, it was an awesome opportunity. It put me in touch with folks like Sidney Hibbert. Sidney Hibbert was from London. He was an actor who trained at the Royal Shakespeare Academy in London and was here on staff at the School of the Arts. He helped us to create the theater festival along with, oh gosh, we had Dr. Linda Kerr Northwood, who was the chairman of the theater department at North Carolina Central University, along with Herman Laverne Jones, along with Ellen Bergstone, whose mother Liz, I believe, Liz Bergstone had a connection with the School of the Arts for many years. She and her daughter helped us in terms of putting a marketing plan in place. There was a small court, Mabel Robinson, of course. I feel like I may be leaving someone out, but we had Lawrence Evans. We had a small core group of consultants that were also either actors or directors that had worked with us in the theater before. And so it was those minds surrounded Larry Leon Henry for the creation of the theater festival.
Did you say you worked for it later on, though? Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
Okay.
It was always my home base. It was always a place where I returned because really it was the only thing that I knew. It's the only thing that I really had trained to do. You know, at that age, it was the one thing that I knew how to do. You know, so I really didn't. I was a complete mess as being in, the workforce. Was a mess. But yeah, so the theater's where I always return.
Can you help me as an outsider? So there was the National Black Theater Festival, and then there's the North Carolina Black Repertory Company. Can you tell me symbiotically, how did they come about? Are they symbiotic?
And they are. The North Carolina Black Repertory Company is the parent company, and the theater festival is housed under an umbrella of the North Carolina Black Repertory Company.
And it sounds like even from its inception, that both of those two entities or organizations were also helped shaped by some of the other arts entities that already existed, like School of the Arts, or like the director of the theater program at, I think you said NC State. So they had helping hands.
Had helping hands, absolutely. then departments. There needed to be panels and workshops. So all of these different um, components of the theater festival were, were keenly developed by many people who had such great love and such a great interest in getting the information out. Because at the time of the inception, Black theater was very isolated. There weren't, no one knew one another. We were very isolated. And that was the uh, concept of him to unite the Black theaters. They weren't united. And so he did a letter campaign. He wanted to reach out to these theater companies and see what their thoughts were of having this gathering, this meeting of theater professionals. And from their input and the input of our community, that we had, we saw that not only was there Mr. Hammond, I know there's Mr. Hammond, there's Woody King, there's Douglas Turner Ward, there's sort of the at the forefront of this new Black theater movement, if you will. All we could do was sort of hope and wish that everyone would sort of follow through with their desire. And sure enough, they were ready. They were as ready for us to sort of get together and share ideas, business plans, marketing strategies. They were just ready to stop working all alone. And so, the theater festival became what we call a family reunion. It's just like a huge family reunion. Everyone knows one another from year after year after year after year. And so it actually dispelled the myth that Black theaters were isolated. It was a vehicle that brought the theaters together.
I was so like amazed and when I volunteered for that first summer that I came, I signed up to volunteer because I got free tickets that way. And I was just floored. I was so just like you said, like watching the people come out of the Benton Convention Center, in these large groups, even if they were just there as spectators, the camaraderie and like, it was like you said, it was like a homecoming. It was like it really was.
Really is. And it's like, and I compare it to church almost. It's like spiritual and, people are having fun, but, it's like a seriousness, but it's never gotten out of hand, never gotten out of line. People really respect where they are and why they are here when they come.
Awesome. So this is a perfect segue. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected everyone and everything. Since the National Black Theater Festival and the North Carolina Black Repertory Company are such a big part of your existence here in Winston, how has COVID-19 affected those two organizations as the first part of the question? And then how has it affected the other parts of the way that you engage with the community, be it church, family, school, whatnot?
How has COVID affected the businesses North Carolina Black Repertory Company and the National Black Theater Festival, as well as my personal involvement in the community. It's been really disruptive. Um, the one thing I can say about the theater um, is they have been very innovative. They've continued to stage theater pieces. We have a huge season in store this year. In March, we are slated to have the premiere of a Maya Angelou um, um, performance production, but it was slated to go slated for a Broadway run, and all of that I'm certain has been sort of has been put off. I'm certain, but they've been able to do the virtual reading. They did that through the summer. We have a huge um, winter or Christmas show on Black Nativity. They did that online as well. They're continuing to try and do it virtually. As for me and my participation, it's been little to no, really. I haven't been involved in anything. Now, I do know people that have staged productions. I know a company that staged The Wiz back in the summer, and they would have loved and enjoyed for me to have helped out in some way. No, not me. I was no, no. I couldn't put myself at risk like that because I stay with my parents. They're elderly and have underlying health issues. But I was amazed. There's just some people that are just going to do it. They're just not going to be. They're not going to be affected by this stuff, I guess.
Yeah, it's you know, it's really like, I think it's going to be real interesting to see how from a distance, um how we were all able to adapt, you know, and 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 exist in a different way, but still be able to, as artists in particular, you know, still like look at us right now doing this project, kind of chronicling the history through, you know, video interviews. That's an adaptation. You know, came from adaptation that we wanted to do something, and so we adapt. And I
Right.
think, you know, that's kind of part of the human spirit, is that adaptation. Um,
Right.
my
There
other,
have been,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, one thing that I have noticed um, that is affecting me, I think, I'm not exactly sure how, but we are losing so many people. So many people are dying, and you're not able to go to funerals and pay your respects the way that, we have been conditioned to do, in the past. And, you know, I can tell, with um, folks that passed that my parents are close to, that they can't go to their funerals. It sort of affects people, you know. That's just one thing, in particular. But I do notice that I will give my mother my laptop on Sundays so she can still attend church, live. And so she's doing that. Well, I shouldn't say live, but virtually. But things just we're getting used to this new weird.
Yeah. You mentioned something just now about uh, the COVID death toll in your community. And it has been factually proven that communities of color have been hit more strongly than white communities of color. And how has that affected you, aside from just the losses themselves? And what are, I guess, I guess for me as a white person, like I've known about this for a while, the inequalities in our healthcare system, um, but I haven't seen it so clear cut, like with such clear evidence that our system is flawed and broken. And so for me, and I think for a lot of white advocates and white allies, we're like shocked and like want to do something and want to try to fix, the problems. And I'm wondering if the Black community is reacting the same way, or is it a different type of reaction because you have a different lived experience?
Let me say it is, let's see, there was a funeral yesterday. There was a funeral today. There have been like funerals every week, if not every other week. It's just been unbelievable. It's been unbelievable. Um, uh, I don't know. I think my parents were able to get vaccination at one point. My dad had one, but my mom didn't. And I asked, I said, well, why would they even allow that to be for one partner to get a shot and the other to have to wait until April to get a shot? I said, that doesn't even make sense. But she said, but that's what they're doing. That's the way they did it. But it turns out that there was a local church that had been given permission to give vaccines, I guess, to people of a certain age, which my parents fall under. And she was able to get a vaccination just last Wednesday. So, some people are having to sort of figure it out the hard way. And well, the hard way is that, very little has been communicated. It's just so crazy. Communication's just been so crazy. Um, I, I almost don't even have an answer. I'm just sort of seeing stuff that I can't believe is happening.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you're still in a state of shock. Like you said, you're seeing you're seeing the death of like you were in a war zone, right? Like that's what you would expect.
Yeah.
In a state of war, and these are what I'm assuming are more elderly Black men and women, and you're.
Yeah, but the thing of people, I'm telling you, these were vibrant people. One man in particular um, um, owned one of the largest office furnishing um, companies in the Southeast, African American, and was playing golf and then got sick and was dead. And then just the other week, one of our senior um, school board members, Mr. Victor Johnson, um, passed from COVID. And it was just, I mean, not only did he have it, I mean, his entire family had it and didn't know it. They all ended up having to go to the hospital. He didn't make it. I mean, it's crazy. It's just crazy.
So my heart goes out to you and to your community. I've only experienced one death myself, and I went to one online funeral, and throughout this whole thing, just one. I mean, that we're pretty much the same age. um
Yeah.
so there is a stark difference. A stark difference. Um, Although I do have to say, my parents struggled to get the vaccine too. My mom had to drive all the way to Michigan from Illinois to get the vaccine because they were doing it quicker in Michigan than in Illinois.
Yeah.
But that leads really to my question to you about diversity in Winston-Salem. I'm just going to leave the question really broad. What would you want to say for the books of history about diversity in Winston-Salem in any capacity you want to talk about?
I would love for the books to show that at one point, Winston-Salem really thrived in our African American community. We were one of the only cities that had an African American bus company. We had mechanics and farmers bank, but we had businesses that were thriving parts of this community. And in my generation, I lived to see all that stuff sort of dissipate. And I know if we've had it before, we can get it again. And I think we need some really strong, creative, innovative leadership, because right now, what I'm seeing is a small sort of takeover. There's a competition theme between Wake Forest and
Can you repeat that? I think we had a little noise problem. Can you repeat that again?
Yes. What I can see is it seems like Wake Forest is competing for land and space, and as well as the downtown. I don't know if it's the downtown. I don't know who it is downtown, but I'm noticing a lot of development or redevelopment of what were known as community projects, where low-income Black families live. They're now tearing these down. They're rebuilding the property with condos that are, price range for, I guess, folks that are working downtown in executive style positions. And you can see it. You can see it all over the outskirts of downtown happening. But, there's concern, and I'm saying to myself, well, who are the city council people that are watching this happen, that know much more than an average citizen like myself knows? There need to be, I guess, more people in the rooms where the decisions are being made, because we could be losing, some sacred land, that had traditionally been, occupied and, by the African American community.
Yeah, that solution to gentrification is it's so elusive, because on the one hand, we do know that revitalizing areas that have once been economically depressed does spur the economics. But the question is, who does it spur it for, right?
Right.
And I think you're spot on with your, assumption of these high-rise condos. I was looking at some the other day, like $2,100 rent for a 2-bedroom like loft in downtown Winston-Salem. I mean, it's ludicrous.
And Aviva, the funny thing about it is, back in when was this? This would have been, I graduated high school in 1985, so this may have been around the early 90s. The buildings that are on Liberty and Trade Street, right downtown, they were selling for pennies on the square foot. I'm telling you, they were trying to give them away. And now, fast forward to 2021, nobody can afford it.
You should have taken your bus ticket money and bought a building.
If I only had known.
Oh.
I'm telling you, they were trying to give the buildings away. They couldn't.
Right.
They couldn't.
So you discussed a little bit about this gentrification problem, and you've been here a long time, many generations. and you yourself have children of your own. So do you speak to them about these problems in Winston, or do you not burden them with these problems, or can they avoid, you know, seeing the things because they're children? And do they want to stay or do they want to go?
Well, I'll tell you what, Imani has said for years that she wanted to attend Winston State University. I told her, I said, well, that's where I went to school. And I said, I mean, from the time that was a little girl, she said she wanted to go to Winston State. But now that she's a junior in high school, it's time for her to sort of at least for us to give her options of other things to look at. What do you want to study? What do you want to pursue? What are your interests? Right now she's cheerleader. She's a cheerleader, and she's got great school spirit. The grades are great. She's an avid reader. Um, I think it was about a month ago I told her that I wanted to start a program, and there was something on the side that I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it for the children at the children's hospital. And I said, I want you to help me. I want you to help me um, get the concept together, and then from here on out, you could sort of know what was going on with this new organization, this little group. You know, I asked her, I said, well, what do you think? What do you think? She said, I think it's great. I think it's great, especially because we're helping somebody else. So I know that she wants to serve others in some capacity. She's brilliant, really very smart, much smarter than I was at this age. And so I just sort of stand back and watch her, and I'm sure that she's aware. She's very aware. They are a little more, I think, aware of things going on at this age than I was. When I was in high school, the one thing that I remember the onset of AIDS, and then I also remember something was going on with this guy named Daryl Hunt. Today, they would know everything about Daryl Hunt. They would know everything about the system. They would know everything, much more than I did at that age. But I just, I can only, I can only see great things for her. I try to stay out of her way, and just be assistant whenever necessary. But yeah, I'm just proud of her.
Did she or did you participate in any of the Black Lives Matter protests, events, whatever, anything that happened over the summer?
No, man.
And is that because of COVID? Because there was a convergence between the Black Lives Matter protests and COVID. So that was a huge, issue for a lot of folks participating.
Yeah,
Or was it just something different?
I think it was something different for me. It was something different. I'm listen. I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm not about to go out and march at this age. I mean, I am too old to go out, and I am. In my generation, what I did, I was um, very active. I've always been active, and I've always been able to sort things out through in theater. I didn't. I'll tell you what. As a matter of fact, um, we did a piece. I'm just going to give you some background as to um, how I lend my voice to certain causes. We had done a historical theater piece, a Douglas Turner Award called Day of Absence. And it's a wonderful piece about a day and time when in the small southern town that was very dependent on its um, subservience. At one time, one day, everyone wakes up and all of the black people are gone, and they don't quite know what to do. the brilliant piece called Day of Absence. And we did this piece. And the piece is traditionally done with Black actors, white face. And it's always very controversial whenever it's done. And so, sure enough, it was controversial when we did it. But we didn't care, we didn't care about controversy. And so the journal gave us a scathing review. Scathing review. As a matter of fact, we had, there was a woman by the name of Helen Martin. Helen Martin was another legendary television and film actress who came to a theater festival and fell in love with the city of Winston-Salem. She moved there. And so we had this legendary Hollywood actress living in town, and she wanted to get her chops. She wanted to work on her chops. And so she would come to the theater and she would, do whatever she could whenever, she was needed. And so she was a part of this play as well. So we had an opportunity to work with Helen Martin and to put on this highly outrageous show. Long story short, we got the scathing review, and Larry Leon was not sit still because he knew all the folks down at the Journal. They were all friends of ours, and usually everything that we did, would be reviewed, very, very. Now we would get these reviews, and so he said, "No, I'm not going to let this sit." So he took the entire cast. We got together one day around 12 noon, went down to the Journal, and we made ticket signs, and we ticketed the Journal over there, what we call racist review of our play. So, I was part of a generation that knew how to, do things a little different. And so I was sort of under the umbrella of those folks. I attended the Million Man March, which was a highlight, which has been a highlight of my life. My brother and I. And, so this generation is doing what they feel is necessary, and they're doing fine. They're doing fine.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Those are great stories. I'm taking a class called History of Black Cinema, and one of my professors, Kevin Jones, is a Black producer from Hollywood, and then we had a guest lecturer from NC State named, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget her name, Natalie Burnett Knowles, Burnett Brown. Anyway, Natalie Burnett Brown, I don't know if that rings familiar. But anyway, we were having class and we were kind of talking about this this generation moving the needle in film, at least, trying to change perceptions and change stereotypes, and theater is part of that as well. And they both said they they have some optimism and some hope, but it's moving way too slow. That it's like a glacial move, a glacier moving, when it needs to be like a really fast running river. And I
True.
would say, go ahead.
Oh no, I was agreeing with you. It's so true. A good friend of mine, and we were just talking. One of the reasons, why I left Los Angeles when I did, and I mean, people would think, well, you were doing pretty well. I was working at Universal Studios. I was a tour guide. I loved it. There was no problem at all. It was part of, my theater background. I was using that and able to convince myself, well, you're doing a long running play. So it was fun. But, we don't have enough, just like I was saying about how the land is being brought up by these people, around us in this Salem. There are not enough people in the room making decisions. And if they are, um, the decisions that they're making are just making things move much more slowly. I mean, mm, I'm amazed at the lack of opportunity there, although there are many opportunities, but there's never been a great um, um, there's never been um, the choices. Choices have never been presented to us as I've seen presented to others. It's always going to be a rough one.
Yeah.
And that's got some, and a lot of it's got stuff to do with uh, old American history that they just will not come to terms with. And I'm not pulling my hair out to make someone understand that you can agree that there have been wrongs, you know, without feeling so threatened to keep change from happening. You know, just like I was telling my mom, you mean to tell me they're going to give dad the shot and they're not going to give you the shot? And y'all are husband and wife. I mean, it's just some shit that just does not have an explanation. Um, and it's just going to be wrong. And my love for the theater festival is that it allowed me to see a world created where you can create your own opportunities, you can create your own choices, you can meet and talk to the folks that will be most effective in your life every other year for about a week and a half. And that may be what it needs for an individual. And because I've sort of been part of the process, because I was part of that process, I feel like if I don't set foot on another movie set, if I don't set foot in another studio, if I don't set foot on another stage, I'll be okay. And I hate to be that resolute, but my energy for competing for stuff, the way that most people compete for stuff.
I hear that. I hear that. As a 47-year-old woman who's going to try to get into the TV, the TV writers' room, listening to these young people talking about how they're, assistant this, assistant that. I'm like, I was a assistant a long time ago. I'm like, I'm no longer assistant material.
Exactly. No, ma'am. Those days, those dues paying days are gone. They're long gone.
Oh, John, this has been so great. I have two more questions to ask you before we wrap up.
Okay.
You've kind of already touched on it, but I'm going to ask it specifically. What future changes do you want to see for Winston? If you had to pick one arena for future changes for Winston-Salem, what would it be?
Okay. I'll say okay. What future changes would I like to see in Winston-Salem? Aviva, I'm going to share something with you. And although I know that we are being recorded, I don't mind. I don't mind saying this. But one thing that left me sort of perplexed, not sort of perplexed, but when Larry Leon Hamlin passed and the city did not offer to give, donate, offer that building to his theater company, that did something. That really did something in terms of my belief that that they really, really got it, But when I saw that it was as easy for another organization to just offer money to the city for that building and they gave it away. I mean, I know money talks, but
can you tell us the background on that? Because we don't know.
Well, what I remember at the time, let me tell you, I wasn't working at the theater. I was working a temp job, and was in touch with buildings, and was told that they were planning to move out of the building because a church had purchased the building for about, well, I forget, was it 4 million, maybe between $2 and $4 million in cash. And I said, okay. So we there were certain folks, only certain folks that were allowed to help, moving in the moving of so much um, unidentifiable stuff. I mean, it would look unidentifiable to anyone else. So, I mean, me and Sylvia and a couple of us that were there from the very beginning, we were able to sort of sort and file and relocate things. But like right now, they just have an office space. I think the office space has been that maybe, I don't know. I really don't know any of the business behind where they are. But they're in an office building downtown. And we have use of the Haynes Brand Theater, but for all the money that theater company has made for the city of Winston-Salem, it just looks like they would have been given first dibs on that. Haynes, what was it? It was the Haynes Art Complex. Yeah, it was Haynes Art Complex, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So we need we need we're in need of a theater. We're in need of our own theater. And if not that theater, maybe one that I'll have to create. But we have to have our own space and our own self-sufficient space, our own self-sufficient mechanism. You know, we gotta keep these dreams alive.
I love that. That gave me like I was mad when you said that that the city didn't honor the request for the building, and then but then like hopeful that you're gonna get that building, like you're gonna get it.
And then when I asked, when I asked Sylvia, I said, Sylvia, why don't we why don't we buy it? It's too much upkeep, too much upkeep. So some folks were worried that it was such an old building. They still had those what do you call those the shelters, underground shelters during the war times. You would go down
Bunkers.
bunkers. Yeah, they still had bunkers. It was like a bunker downstairs in the basement. So it's an old building, and we don't know what kind of stuff is floating around up in the ceiling up in there. But you think about stuff like that when it's so easily sold.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last question is a fun one. So as you know, part of this project, we're thinking about doing a community quilt with pieces from our interviewees and from the community. So what would you put in a piece, or what would you use, and what would it represent?
As part of a quilt, what would I use um, to represent me or Winston-Salem? Okay, let's see. I have, oh yeah, I have one of my first, well, I have my first um, National Black Theater t-shirt that I would donate to be woven into the quilt. And it would represent, what it would represent if I were to see my t-shirt in the quilt. For me, it would represent the time when I was, I guess I was 11 or 12 years old, 11 and 12 years old. And I had a little girlfriend, and we would sneak out my parents and I, we would sneak out and have these midnight picnics. And we would go to the theater and we would set up our blankets right behind the shop that became the shop and have our little stage camp. Talk about one day how we would be on stage and our plans for our life in the theater. And that's what it reminded me of. And that's why I would donate that.
Did we get that with the audio?
Partially. Do you want to repeat it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
repeat the story starting from going on a midnight picnic, please.
Oh, sure. Sure, I will. Sure, sure. Um, I would I would donate my first T-shirt from the National Black Theater Festival because it would remind me of the times when my girlfriend and I, when we were 12 years old, we would meet up, we would sneak away at midnight. We'd have midnight picnics and we would sneak up to the theater and we would go behind the shop building and we would set up our blanket and our candle and we would have our sodas and we would sit and we would pretend like we were doing shop talk and we would talk about working on the stage and what we were going to be doing in the future with our careers as actors, So that's what I would want to see. And certainly that's what it would remind me of.
Well, thank you, John. That was so great. I love that story. It was the best. That's why we had to make sure to get it right. Thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Aviva, you are so welcome. I thank you so much. I do. This has been fun.
Absolutely.
And do you know, as much as we planned this,